Roby Price, and welcome to my workshop.
I'm just back from Jamestown, Talent Mill. Got some pine in the back. That's gonna be for the ceiling in the new room. Let me get this out of the truck. We'll talk about how this is gonna work.
Trim carpentry in the new room. Episode 1, a new ceiling.
Well, we're out of the truck, and somehow it looks like a bigger stack here on these two horses than it did in the bed of my truck. And that's because it's stickered. And we sticker it for a good reason. We got to acclimate this wood to this environment, my shop environment. And we're air conditioned here, and where it came from was not. So we need to give it a little time to rest. For the most part, I think we've got some pretty good lumber here. I think we can make almost all of it work with the standard amount of milling. Now, this is going to be for the ceiling in the new room, and that's going to be a tongue and groove ceiling, and we're going to have a beveled edge on each side. Let me show you what it's going to look like. It's the best surface I've got as an example, and unfortunately it is painted. But let's go on up to the house and we'll take a look at what we're shooting for. Well, the more I thought about it, the more I thought we'd look at one of the upstairs bedrooms. This will give us a much better idea of what we're trying to do. This is actually the ceiling, and it's one of those sloped ceilings at 45. Directly on the other side of this, you do have the roof. Now, we have a plank, it's roughly 3 inches wide, and we have a simple bevel on each side of the board. But it's a little more complicated than that, because when you get into this, there is a tongue and groove built into that, and that's what holds this all together very tightly. It's a very efficient and old way of putting in wall plank. I'm going to try to give you a good idea of all the different transitions we have in this space, because we've got to mimic these in the new room. This is one of the bedrooms where I have a 45-degree angle intersecting a ceiling, where we've got this new plank. All we've got is a butt joint. It's simple enough, easy to do. That's probably the easiest thing we will do. Whenever you have a vertical meeting with a 45-degree horizontal, in this corner right here, we've got roughly a 1 1/4 by 1 1/4 corner block. Now this will just butt right into that side, and it'll run right into that side. Our planking is, it's 3/4 of an inch thick, so we're 1 1/4. There is a tiny slant right there. It is just a bevel, and a very slight one at that. But it is there, and it's prominent, and you see it everywhere throughout the house. So we will mimic that. Where I have a transition from a pattern running this way and a perpendicular pattern, like on this wall over here, we have a transition strip that runs the distance. There is no bevel on that. And we will be mimicking all these details in the new room. There's been a lot of improvements in this room since the last time we shot up here. Now, the bathroom, yes, I agree. It was in place. Tub, shower, sink, all those things were where they were supposed to be. But there are some improvements here, that some of which may not be apparent. The first of which is we have electricity everywhere we need it, everywhere it's supposed to be, and it all matches up. It's all done correctly. 37 boxes. Now, part of that is because the previous wiring wasn't quite what I wanted, and second is I had to use that wiring because it went up through the walls, underneath the sheetrock in various places. So it was a little bit of a mismatch. So I ran some wire, I used some wire, a lot of boxes, and a lot of electrical. We have multiple switches for lights and fans. We have plugs everywhere up here, and we even have lights and plugs in the attic spaces, which is important because there's going to be some utilities put in there. So there you have it, a lot done. Second, all the furring strips are in for the wall plank. The wall plank is vertical. It's not sheet product. I can't just nail to the studs. That's not going to work. I have to have these strips right here because the boards, some of them are narrow, some of them are wide, but they all need something to nail too. And that's the reason for that. Now, before we can start on the walls, we have to do the ceiling. That's first. And in order to do the ceiling, we have to do a couple of things. One is we have to let that wood acclimate before we even can mill it. And that's got to happen too. So there's a big step. Second, we've got to get our corners in around the tops where we have that transition that I was talking to you about. And that transition's not going to be the 1 1/4 by 1 1/4 block. Why is that? Because I got a furring strip right here and I'm going to be nailing to the studs up there. So I've got to put some depth behind it to make it work. And we'll do that. It's just a matter of figuring it out. Actually, it's just 3/4 of an inch more. So it's a pretty simple process, but it's got to be done. So there's a lot of things that have to happen and there's some time that has to pass before we can really get started on much of anything. So the next time you see me, I'll be in a different shirt. Well, we're back at it. These boards have had a chance to acclimate and I have started working on them already. Now I have jointed all these boards. I have a straight edge on the bottom of each one. Now these are 9 feet long, little plus. That's the width of the dormer area and that's what we're focusing on first. Now general rule of thumb, you can get a straight edge on a jointer up to about twice the length of the combined beds. Takes a little longer, but you can get there. Now, this is 1x4 stock, which means it's 3.5 inches wide and 3/4 of an inch thick. But the point of the matter is, we want 3-inch boards, and I did not take off enough of any of these boards to circumvent that measure. So we're going to take all these over to the table saw, we're going to rip them to width, and then we're going to do some molding. All my lumber is milled up and it looks great. And I've got it where I want it because the next step is to put the tongue and groove and 2 bevels in place. And we'll use my Woodmaster over here to do that. Now I have a sample here that I've been working with and I have a tongue right here and I have a bevel and a bevel. But you'll notice that I don't have a groove. Unfortunately, I can't get the routers on the ends close enough together to make that full profile in one pass. So we'll end up doing it twice. This is the first shape. We'll run all the boards through the first time and we will get this profile. The second time we go through, we'll change out a router with the bit, we'll turn the board around and get this side done. 2 steps, but it should be okay because all the fences remain in the same place. It's just a matter of dialing in the height of the bit to make sure that we match up with the existing tongue.
Once the machine is set up, it's really pretty simple. It's just a matter of pushing the boards through and keeping a rhythm going so that we're efficient with our time. We'll do the tongues first, and to be truthful, there's no particular reason. But after all those are done, we'll reset the machine and we'll focus on the grooves.
Well, I think we're about there. We got our tongue and groove on both sides and we got a nice bevel. All the boards are complete and I have more than enough. We just got to haul it upstairs and get ourselves set up to install it on the ceiling. Part of what we're doing is sneaking up on this first board. We'll use that one to determine the length of the rest of them. Now, I don't know if you can see up here, but I've got blue lines. Those are popped on there to signify where the joists are, and we'll use those to nail the board up once we get one that is measured to length. Now, we're close, but I've got a little bit farther to go yet. Oh, that is real close. All right, let's try that right there. Remember, if you get it too small, you can't make it longer. Well, I've taken a little time to move my lumber to the back of these 2 horses instead of having them over there. I was literally having some trouble walking around this place. The room's big, but it's not that big. So I've got my mark set right up here and ready to make the cut. And there's one thing I want to point out. I have, on this furring strip, I have actually taken and put myself a little bit of a stop. The room is small, but take advantage of every opportunity you can to use the space that you have. Well, I'm tucked here in the corner and I have a wall plank right here behind me. That wall plank is just shy, 3/4 of an inch from the ceiling, and it is actually holding this end of my ceiling plank in place. Now the other end is sucked up tight against that corner molding that I put in place. There's nothing holding that board up there besides the compression. There's a bit of a bow in the middle, but not a whole lot. This is a good tight fit, and that's what I want. So what I'll do is I'll use this one as the measure and start cutting some of these other boards to length. And we'll do only a couple at a time. This room may not be square, so we want to keep our eye on this. And as we start to get wider or smaller, we make adjustments as we travel toward the center. We're on the other side and we're in place. Now, again, we've got our lines marked right here. We're gonna fire a nail, and I'm using 1 3/4 inch finish nails through the tongue. And that way you'll keep it from showing nearly so much. Give a little bit of pressure up while you do it. Not too sure that's good. All right, now just move down and get the rest of them.
There are a lot of boards to put in, and to be truthful, it's a lot of the same. So we'll look at this dormer sequence, and then I'll show you the rest.
Well, we're finally there. They are all in place, with the exception of a few lonely boards back in the hallway where we have some very unusual geometry. Now, I know how the top goes in, where it interfaces with the other plates of the ceiling. I just don't understand the bottom yet because I don't have the wall boards in place. When I get a few wall plank in place, I'll understand that and I'll be able to cut the miters accordingly. But for now, we're done, and it looks great. There are a couple of things that I want to point out prior to closing out this episode, and this will help you if you decide to take on a project like this. The first thing is this tongue right here. This comes right off the milling machine, and it is a sharp edge. If you'll take a block plane and knock off both sides, that tongue will seat in this groove so much nicer. Now, when you put your boards up, you're toenailing through the tongue right here, and that's to help not see the nail go through. And that presses the board very tightly up against the rafter, or in my case, the sheetrock. Now, if you have a situation where it's still fighting you, take a rabbet plane and knock the bottom off there, and that will help the board seat very nicely as well. Now, again, we have sheetrock here. I did not want to tear the sheetrock out. It gives me a little more R factor. It acts as a little bit more of a vapor barrier, and there's considerable rock wool insulation up there that, quite frankly, I didn't want to deal with when it came down, and I didn't want to take the time to put it back. So the sheetrock is a reality, and it's up there, and it's going to stay. Now, all that's said and done with, we've got a lot more things to do here. And the first thing that we're going to do, now that the ceiling is in place, is we're going to start looking at doors. And we have a myriad of them in this room. We have 2 over in the dormer over here. And that is to access the attic space behind the bathroom and behind the closets. You can never have enough storage. And we've got utilities behind the bathroom that we really do need to have access to in the future. Second, I've got 2 closets right here. Then they need doorways as well. We also have, if you'll recall, the built-in storage. We need doors to get to that as well. Finally, We've got a door behind me, and I've got 2 areas here and one in the hallway where we need to get to this area behind the wall as well. Again, storage is important, and utilities are all located in this dormer space over here. We have to have access to them. So a lot of doors. So that's what we're going to be looking at next time in Roby's workshop.